Welcome back to our dual language immersion series through Keep Indiana Learning. We kicked off our series with Paul Ketchum, Superintendent of Batesville Community School Corporation. And today we're moving on to a district that I know and love because I am a graduate of this district. So today we have with us Dr. Sean A. Smith, who is the proud Superintendent of Lawrence Township Schools. Dr. Smith, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
So let's get right into it. Can you tell us a little bit about, and I know the dual language immersion program predates your tenure in the district, but can you tell us a little bit about the story behind a dual language immersion in Lawrence Township?
That is a good question. I've been superintendent going on 11 years, so I've been here quite some time. But roughly about 30 years ago, the district had a vision to bring a dual immersion program, magnet school, to Lawrence Township, and they created it called Forest Glen Elementary, which still exists to this day. And so we're celebrating about 30 years of excellence with this program. It started out in a very small scale that has grown. We have 3 immersion elementary schools in our district today, at Sunnyside Elementary and Scouse Test, and of course Forest Glen. But the whole premise was it was for innovation. They had a group of parents that, hey, we want our kids to be bilingual. And the community was very diverse, had a deep-rooted history because, of course, of the military base being here at Fort Benjamin Harrison. And so why not? It was a great idea. And they brought teachers from all over the world to start this immersion program. And it still exists to this day.
So in our last episode, we had Mandarin was the language. So which language is used in Lawrence Township, and why that language?
Well, they had the vision of Spanish. And certainly today in our township, in our state, in our country, we know why. Because we have a large influx of Spanish-speaking people in our country, especially here in the Western Hemisphere. A huge language that's outside of English is being spoken. So that was their decision 30 years ago, and we've just expanded on it. It is very robust.
So let's talk about the logistics of this program, because there has to be a lot that goes into having a program like this, maintaining a program. Mm-hmm. So for someone that doesn't really know anything about dual language immersion, what are the steps that districts and school leaders have to take to actually maintain and implement a DLI program?
Well, I think first and foremost, you have to understand the outcome of the program. The program's outcome is to make these young people bilingual. Bilingual and biliterate is something that we emphasize immensely in our K-12 program, is that when a youngster leaves us, they're going to be able to speak the language, write the language, and also fully understand the culture. And we immerse ourselves. That's why it's called immersion. We're immersing ourselves in the learning the new language, but also students don't lose their native language. They actually gain. And so when you look at, I hate just talk about test scores, but some of our highest achieving test scores we have in our district is because our kids are bilingual. Biliteracy is a sign of strong intellect, and young people at a very early age can acquire a second language pretty easily. So for the layman person out there, those are the 3 points. I mean, your kid's going to be bilingual. They're also going to be able to write the language, and they can fully understand the cultures that are immersed in the Spanish languages. And it's really simple, but it's also complex because we also have to build the staff in the school. Finding bilingual teachers requires a little bit of work because you need to bring people from other countries and other parts of the United States. And that's something that we do well. We've been doing it over 30 years. So all of our staff, and we've got a combination of staff, we've got English-speaking staff as well as Spanish-speaking staff working collaboratively to pull off this achievement. And most of our schools, matter of fact, all 3 of our schools have bilingual administrators and principals who are able to speak the language and recruit the teachers to come to our district.
So when you talk about recruitment, what are some, what is the process for recruiting a bilingual teacher? Because as you and I both know, there's been times recently where people have talked about the struggle of recruiting teachers just in general. But now you're looking for a teacher who is bilingual, who can also teach in English and in Spanish. So, what tips do you have to find an excellent educator who can teach in a bilingual dual language immersion program?
Well, first and foremost, you have to you're going to have to get your boots on the ground and travel outside of the country. So we have strong connections with the Mexican consulate. We're also a part of the International Spanish Academies. So those overall reaching international organizations, we have worked with them over the years and partnered to get some teachers to us. But because our program has expanded out and become so large, we actually put the boots on the ground and we travel to other countries. We travel to the island of Puerto Rico and other parts of the United States. And we have a blessing in Lawrence Township. Our program has been in existence for over 30 years. Guess what, Wildcat? We have former students who've gone through our program who have come back home to become teachers in our immersion program. So it is a constant every year endeavor seeking out networking to bring teachers into our program. And as I said earlier, we have 3 elementary schools that are the starting point for our immersion program, and obviously in the middle school, and then eventually eventually they will graduate from both of our high schools with an immersion diploma. And right now it's just Lawrence North, but in 4 years it will also be Lawrence Central because we're phasing the program at Lawrence Central High School.
So, what does the programming look like when they get to middle and high school? Because you have the elementary schools where they start off at, and for those that don't know, there are other elementary schools in Lawrence Township, but there are certain elementary schools where this programming is housed, and then they matriculate up through the middle schools and then to the high school. How does that change when you have students who are not necessarily participating in that program on those different levels?
Yeah, and so, by that point, you don't introduce new students into the middle and high school program. Those kids are locked in at elementary school. And I do want to go back because I think when we're acquiring the language, we want to talk a little bit about how we get kids to that level. And so we use a strategy in kindergarten, first grade, where 80% of the time they're learning Spanish, 20% English. And then we phase up in grade 2 to 70%, 70-30, 70% Spanish, 30% English. And then by the time they get in grade 3, it's 60-40. And then we get to a 50-50 model as they move through grade 4 through 6. That carries over into the high school. And then we get more prescriptive as we get into the middle and high school. They don't have an all-day immersion program. Their programs go into the subject matter. So they have the Spanish for their English and the social studies and their science classes. And yes, at that point, they're more in a cohort, the same thing as they get into high school, but they expand out with some other courses, and it gets very prescriptive to subject matter. And by that time, they become very firm in that subject matter, and they're able, obviously, to not only speak the language, but they can write the language.
Oh, I love it. So I like how you shared it. There's like a cohort model. So once they leave the elementary school, those students are staying together and we're not introducing new students. At the same token, how do you support students in the program who may struggle at first? Because as you stated at the beginning, you're starting off with this 80-20 model where 80% is the language that may not be their first language. What supports are available for students who are struggling?
Well, the whole program is built around supports and supporting the parents also, because it's parents who put their kids in this program think, oh, I got to become bilingual also. So we offer parents opportunities to learn the language. We also have additional after-school programming that we offer to the kids. And then we do a lot of pull-out programming and supports throughout the day for all of our students to make sure that they're meeting obviously the state standards that we need for them in English, but also that they're becoming proficient and fluent in Spanish. Sometimes we have, going back to kids being able to enter in the program. Sometimes we get youngsters that come from other parts of the country or that they can speak the language also, and we'll test them into the program. But we never put a kid in a position where they're going to be at a disadvantage being in our immersion program, because we offer other languages that they can learn at a later date. But we really try to encourage kids that are solid in that foundation to join in our immersion program.
Well, thanks for that clarification. Also, how do you support the teachers, especially if they're coming to America and they haven't lived here, how does that work?
Yeah, there are definitely culture issues. There's weather issues. especially those that are coming from the South and places like Puerto Rico and the islands where it's warm there all year long, and then you come to Indiana and there's snow. But the beautiful thing about Lawrence Township is that we have a well-established Spanish community that's very supportive. We have corporate sponsors. We have our foundation. We find ways to support the transition of our teachers to the corporation, helping them out with housing and networking within our system and our people to make sure that it's a smooth transition. But we've been around long enough that many of the people come by word of mouth, and they know the support that we're going to put in place for those teachers to make a seamless transition to our school corporation. I mean, they come to Indiana outside of, working in Lawrence, they may find themselves completely illiterate because there aren't people that speak Spanish, and we have that throughout our systems.
So thinking about people who may want to start a program like this, what are some challenges that people have to be aware of or cognizant of that they may need to work through before implementing a DLI program?
Exactly. I think the first and foremost thing is that people have to understand is that this isn't a knock on English. Sometime in the United States, we become very closed-minded to being multi-language in the Western Hemisphere. And we meet people from the Eastern Hemisphere, Europe and Africa, Asia places, who are just naturally multilingual. This is an opportunity to grow, to become multilingual and multiliterate, which is easy once you learn that second language to learn a third or fourth or fifth language. But there are some dynamics that go on in the world market of economics that allow for our students to excel. Whether, one of our former students is a doctor, and she talked about came back to speak to our community about, I'm doing surgery and talking Spanish with people because of my experiences that I got in Lawrence Township through the Spanish Immersion program. Or some of our people have come back and spoke that work for the government, that actually work in countries and able to speak the language and understand the culture. This is a huge economic opportunity for young people and their families becoming biliterate. And I would just prescribe that anyone, if you want to be in the international market of economics, biliteracy is great. English may be the dominant language of money, but being biliterate and bicultural is certainly a benefit to our country.
Do any of the students have the opportunity through Lawrence Township to travel to Spanish speaking countries? And if so, can you tell us a little bit about what those experiences entail?
Yeah, we do. That's one of our secret sauces that at the elementary, we do take abroad trips every year to various Spanish speaking countries. And the list is long. I can't give you all of them. The last one I can remember, I think last year was Ecuador. Peru, the kids get the opportunity to travel the world and really experience the culture. That's the culture side of it. And then as well as get the opportunity to use their language. And so a large percentage of the kids at the Forest Glen, eventually, because we're phasing right now at Sunnyside and at Scout's Test, get to take advantage of these abroad trips with their families.
And a lot of the aspects of dual language immersion, there is funding that's needed. So how do school districts go about thinking about finances and funding things, like if you're going out of the country, supplies, all of those things? Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, naturally, we fund them, the teachers. We pay them just like any other teacher in our district. And we've just dedicated our resources to run a Spanish immersion program. I also remind, we have a unique situation in Lawrence is that 50% of my students that are in the program are native Spanish speakers. So we have that advantage of having the culture side by side with students that are, because of our great diversity that we have here in the township. So that makes that part of it easy. We do a lot of fundraising. We have a lot of support from our educational foundation and other community partners who work alongside of us to support this program. And our parents make a sizable commitment to it, but it's not required. But, we have resources that we've acquired over the years to make sure these kids get a well-rounded experience.
Well, fundraising is definitely key. And I love, and I'm glad you pointed, and I'm glad you pointed out that half of your program are Spanish speakers, because one of the downsides of English as a new language sometimes is that our goal is to get students to acquire English. And sometimes we don't focus on that biliteracy and that bicultural. So I think that is when a lot of times we think about dual language immersion program, we think about English speakers learning the language,
Yes.
and we don't think about the benefit to students who are already multilingual learners of actually learning in their first language during the school day. So I'm glad you lifted it up. You kind of talked about this already, but what are some success stories that has come out of this program that maybe you could share a little bit more about? I know you alluded to the student that was a doctor that came back to
Yes.
speak, but maybe you know some more success stories you can share with
Yeah, and
us.
I mentioned a few secret sauces there. You heard about teachers, youngsters have gone through our program now, coming back and actually teaching. The overall academic success of kids through the immersion programs is through the roof. These are some of your top students by the time they're seniors in high school. They are well educated. I looked at we had salutatorian and valedictorian. We had a great year because we had 4 total because we had a lot of ties this year. And the majority of those kids standing on stage and speaking are from the immersion program. The kids are just going to excel and explode academically being biliterate. And I just can't emphasize that. If I had that opportunity for my own children, I would have taken advantage of it. Just the fact that they could become bilingual and biliterate, just your endless opportunities academically from that. We have a ton of kids that graduate every year with the diploma that we were able to get for the youngsters, signifying that they are bilingual and separating themselves away from the crowd. And college and universities really seeing these kids as some of the top youngsters you want to get in their university, because they're going to walk in, they're going to test out of every single test you're going to give for Spanish at a university. And sometimes they call us back and double check, is this really serious? We'll let the test scores, you give them the test, and I'll tell you, they're going to pass it and do well with it. So those are the tangible benefits. But I think you touched on a secret sauce with Lawrence Township, is that 50% of our kids are Spanish speakers. And often youngsters that come into a public school corporation, a community, any school in the United States, and they don't speak English, it is a struggle. In our program, these youngsters walk in and they feel at home, and they are doubling down on their Spanish speaking and literacy in their own language, and at the same time accelerating and learning English. And there are outstanding students that are coming out with that combination also.
Well, I hope that people are hearing that. And for those of you that don't know, you go look at the legislation. There was a point in time where that we were saying that dual language immersion was the way to go. And then we kind of went away from that and went to sink or swim. And so I'm glad to hear that there are school districts, especially the one that I graduated from, that are doing this special type of work. So if you had to talk to a superintendent or another school leader who's like, I don't know about this, what would be your sales pitch to convince them to come over to join what you're doing to implement this type of programming?
Well, I think it could fit into any community, quite frankly, and emphasizing the benefit of youngsters in our country becoming biliterate and just brilliant youngsters because of the ability to be multilingual. The studies out there are just on top of studies that point, at a very young age, youngsters can learn a lot and they can acquire language acquisition at a very younger age quicker than they come as we get older. And so I think that if the United States is going to be a leader in the world, we've got to make sure that our people are able to communicate and interact with people across the world. I think it's a no-brainer. This community is invested in it, like we said, long before I have, and we're going to continue to do that because we see the overall benefits of youngsters who are coming out just phenomenal students, and they are also bilingual.
And one other question I had that just popped into my brain, what type of professional development supports do the teachers get, especially if you're an English speaking teacher that's working with a Spanish first speaking teacher? Because co-teaching is the thing that happens, but co-teaching can kind of be like a marriage. And there has to be some relationship building that comes there to be successful. So what is your support for your teachers? And then you mentioned that all the elementary schools, there is a bilingual principal. So what types of supports do those principals have to help run a strong and healthy DLI program?
Well, you want to make sure that they have your instructional framework for the whole district that's the same no matter what school. So they're doing the same things that the other schools are doing. So they're involved in all of our professional development. The beautiful thing about an immersion school and having teachers that are bilingual, they're learning too. And their language acquisition gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And we've had a very stable teaching population and a lot of professional development that's shared amongst our immersion schools. And so we do a lot of professional development, both summer and throughout the school year, to make sure that our teachers are strong and solid and being able to teach in that environment. Secret sauce to that is that there is some co-teaching, but we switch classrooms, we mix kids up and give them that dual experience with an English speaking teacher and a Spanish speaking teacher, and partnering and make sure that we're meeting all the standards for the state of Indiana. I'm giving all our secrets out today, Dr. Barnes.
Well, that's
we don't want to hold back because it is a very, very good program.
So what percentage of the school district, roughly, if you don't know off the top of your head, I guess what percentage of students are in the program and then stay in the program till the end? Because sometimes programs have natural matriculation of students for various reasons.
We're running, I take Forest Glen, for example, about 120 kids at every grade level class. And we expanded that out over the years just because of demand. And those kids obviously matriculate into Fall Creek Valley and then eventually on to Lawrence North. But there is a high percentage of kids, I'm just taking that Forest Glen class, that graduate. I think we had almost 80 total graduates with this senior class. So roughly about 40 students didn't continue on for various reasons, because they just didn't want to do it. Beyond that, they've acquired the language, but they didn't want to get the diploma. So we hang on to a ton of students. But here's the big deal for Lawrence Township. We decided 5 years ago to expand out the immersion program to Skiles Test Elementary, which we're now phasing on the west side of our district. No, actually 6 years ago. And those youngsters are now moving into middle school, and then they will be moving into high school. So they're at Belzer, and then they will be at Lawrence North High School. And then we expanded out 2 years ago with a third program at Sunnyside Elementary, which is now at second grade. So we started a first grade kindergarten and matriculating it. We're phasing those kids up. That elementary school will split between the two high schools once they graduate. And it's beautiful. So we have 3 of our 11 elementaries that are immersion. And I have roughly about 8,000 elementary students.
And then if someone, let's say you live in the boundary of Mary Castle, the first school in my brain, because that's the school I went to, and you are going to the dual language immersion program, what does that mean for transportation? Does that make transportation more complicated? And how does what does transportation look like? What are some considerations for transportation of busing kids across?
It is complex. It is very complex. So we use the east-west boundaries. Lawrence Township, we split the district east-west. Mary Castle sits on the west side. So obviously we want to encourage parents to take advantage of the opportunities at Skiles Test Elementary, but they could apply to Forest Glen. Forest Glen is traditionally district-wide. It has a lottery system. You have to apply to it. It's more of our magnet setup. And the others are the same, but the west side school is Skiles Test, and Sunnyside, which sits on the east side, is the east side school.
Can you tell us a little bit about the lottery system that you just mentioned?
Well, and that is, you just apply. You apply to the immersion program, and we obviously we can't place everyone, but we try to give everyone their first or second choice of the 3.
And what are some of the considerations that go into where students go? I'm assuming transportation is probably one of them. But are there other considerations that would be important?
Well, obviously just the enrollment itself. All 3 of those schools, we expect for their populations to grow. Right now, Forest Glen is our largest of the 3. He has almost 800 students that attend Forest Glen Elementary. But with the phase at the other schools, we're expecting those enrollments to increase. So basically what we said in Lawrence Township, Dr. Barnes, is that if you want immersion, we're going to try our best to give it to you. It used to be bottled up and only at Forest Glen Elementary. We've expanded it out to offer it at 3 elementary schools. And that's huge.
That is huge, and I love to hear that the demand is there and that the district is responding to the demand. So
Mhm.
kids aren't, because nobody wants to be on the bus for a
No.
long time going across a school district. So I love that. So final thoughts. What final thoughts do you have for us today as we wrap up our conversation about the wonderful work that's happening in Lawrence Township?
Well, we have had a long history, and I do want to give kudos to those founders who had the vision and foresight 30 plus years ago to create this opportunity. And because of our history, military history, and having a lot of people from all parts of the country and the world here during the time at Fort Benjamin Harrison, I think really seeded that. And we just see the great benefits as our district has changed. And now we have this large new population of students, a lot of immigrant people that come to us that do speak Spanish. And a district our size, we're able to accommodate and welcome those families graciously and build on their skills because we offer Spanish immersion is truly special. The opportunities are endless for kids and families. Your student will become biliterate, bilingual. And I emphasize that biliteracy because it's huge and understanding the complexities of this hemisphere we live in. It's quite frankly very much Spanish. And we're able to embrace that, but at the same time, have a robust English. Some of my highest test scores, if we know in the state of Indiana on the what we call the I Learn test, are at Forest Glen Elementary, because those kids, once you become bilingual, you are going to be even stronger in your own native language and being able to acquire a new language and read it and write it. It just your abilities and skills just grow overnight. And so it's a great program. And I would love to have my families here, families that have their kids go through it. I know it's a struggle for young parents going through because they think they have to learn Spanish. You don't have to do that, but just let those kids go because they're going to acquire the language at a very young age. And when I walk in a fifth grade classroom, they're speaking fluent Spanish. And by the time they are seniors in high school, they can write the language and pass any test in Spanish.
Well, I love it. Well, Dr. Smith, thanks for taking some time out of your busy schedule today
My pleasure.
to talk to us all about the dual language immersion program that has now been expanding across Lawrence Township. And, I would love to circle back some years from now. And you'll probably be telling me that it's at even more elementary schools in the
Yes.
district. So I'm definitely biased to Lawrence Township because I
Go
graduated from there.
Wildcats.
Yep, go Wildcats.
Thank
No
you.
offense to the Bears, but very pro Wildcats over here.
Mhm.
But thanks again for taking some time to talk to us about this. And we will continue this conversation in our next episode.
Thank you, Dr. Barnes. Thank you.